You tell yourself you'll do it tomorrow. Tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. And eventually, something that could have improved your financial life becomes something you wish you had started years earlier. That is the strange thing about procrastination. It rarely feels expensive when you're doing it. There is no bill, no transaction, no notification telling you that you just lost money. You simply don't act. And because nothing happens immediately, it feels harmless. Meet Steve and Daniel. They are both 30 years old. They earn similar incomes. They have similar expenses, and both have the same goal. They want to become financially independent, but they have completely different relationships with action. Steve is always planning. He says he'll start investing after his next raise. He'll build an emergency fund after his credit card is paid off. He'll start exercising after work becomes less stressful. He'll learn about retirement after he understands investing better. Daniel isn't necessarily smarter. He isn't richer. He simply does something different. When he identifies an important financial action, he starts with what he can do today. Not someday, not when conditions are perfect. Today. At first, the difference between them looks almost meaningless. Then 10 years pass, and the gap becomes enormous. Before we follow Steve and Daniel through those 10 years, subscribe. Because this isn't just about procrastination. It's about the hidden financial price of waiting, and why delaying small decisions today can quietly cost you far more than you realize over an entire lifetime. Let's start with something simple. Steve knows he should build an emergency fund. He wants to have $20,000 available for unexpected expenses. But he keeps putting it off. He has a car payment, then his rent increases, then he wants to take a vacation, then Christmas arrives, then his car needs repairs. Every month, there is a reason why this isn't the right time. Steve isn't doing anything obviously irresponsible. He simply keeps moving the starting line. Daniel has the same problems, but he makes a different decision. He doesn't wait until he can save $20,000. He starts with $500, then another $500, then $300, then another $500. His emergency fund isn't impressive at first, but it exists. That matters, because financial progress doesn't usually begin with a dramatic transformation. It begins with a decision that gets repeated. Steve is waiting for the perfect moment. Daniel is creating momentum, and momentum has a financial value. Imagine both men eventually want to invest $500 every month. Steve says he'll start after he pays off a few expenses. Daniel starts immediately. Suppose Daniel invests $500 every month and earns a hypothetical average annual return of 7%. After 10 years, he could have roughly $86,000. Steve decides to wait 5 years. He then starts contributing the same $500 every month for the remaining 5 years. He contributes the same monthly amount during his investing period. But he doesn't have the same amount of time. After those 5 years, his account could be around $36,000. Daniel has more than twice as much. Neither person earned a higher return, neither found a secret investment. Daniel simply started earlier. This is one of the most important mathematical facts in personal finance. Time is not just something that passes. Time is something your money can use. When you delay investing, you don't only lose the money you could have invested today, you lose the future growth that money could have produced. And then you lose the growth on that growth. That is compounding. But procrastination doesn't only affect investing, it affects debt. Imagine Steve has $8,000 of high-interest credit card debt. He knows the interest is expensive. He plans to attack it after he gets his annual bonus. The bonus arrives, but he uses part of it for a vacation. He tells himself he'll deal with the debt next month. Next month arrives. Another expense appears. The balance remains. Daniel has the same debt. He starts paying an extra $200 every month. It's not dramatic. He doesn't eliminate the debt immediately. But the balance begins moving downward. And as the balance falls, less money goes toward interest. That creates more room for the next payment. The process accelerates. Steve's problem isn't that he doesn't understand debt. He understands it perfectly. His problem is that understanding something doesn't automatically make you act. This is where procrastination becomes expensive. Knowledge without action has almost no financial return. You can understand compound interest. You can understand budgeting. You can understand investing. You can understand retirement accounts. You can understand debt. But none of that changes your financial life until behavior follows knowledge. And this is why Steve keeps telling himself something dangerous. I'll do it later. Later feels safe. Today feels inconvenient. But later has a hidden cost. Consider retirement. Steve is 30. His employer offers a retirement plan. The company even matches part of his contribution. Steve knows he should participate, but he thinks he needs the extra money right now, so he waits. Daniel enrolls immediately. He contributes enough to receive the available employer match. He doesn't feel dramatically richer, but part of his compensation is now being invested for his future. Steve is effectively leaving part of his compensation unused, and that money doesn't come back. This is what makes procrastination so dangerous. Some opportunities are reversible, others are not. You can decide to buy a different shirt next week. You can change a streaming subscription. But you cannot go back and invest the money you failed to invest 10 years ago. You cannot recover the exact years of compounding you skipped. You cannot retroactively take advantage of an employer match you ignored. Time moves in one direction. Money can move backward and forward. Time cannot. Now let's look at another common form of procrastination: learning. Steve wants to understand investing. He tells himself he needs to become an expert first. So he watches videos, he saves articles, he bookmarks books, he follows financial creators. But he never actually creates a basic investment plan. Daniel starts with the fundamentals. He learns what diversification means. He learns about risk. He learns about fees. He learns about time horizons. He doesn't know everything. He doesn't need to. He learns enough to take a reasonable first step. Then he improves the plan over time. This is an important distinction. Perfection can become procrastination, wearing professional clothing. You tell yourself you're researching, but sometimes you're simply avoiding the discomfort of making a decision. Steve wants certainty. Daniel accepts that some uncertainty is unavoidable. And that difference compounds too, because the earlier you start, the more opportunities you have to learn from experience. Now imagine Steve finally decides to get serious at age 40. He starts investing. He begins saving. He attacks his debt. He becomes disciplined. He may still build substantial wealth. It's not too late. That is important. The lesson isn't that anyone who procrastinated at 30 is doomed. The lesson is that starting today is better than waiting for another perfect moment. Daniel didn't have a perfect beginning. He simply had an earlier beginning, and that gave him something Steve couldn't buy later: more time. Now think about a $10,000 investment. If it grows at a hypothetical 7% annually, it could become roughly $20,000 after about 10 years. Give it another 10 years, and the number could be around $39,000. The second decade matters enormously. The money isn't just growing, the previous growth is growing. This is why people sometimes underestimate the importance of starting. They look at the first few years and think nothing impressive is happening. Then the curve begins changing. Compounding starts slowly. And that slow beginning tricks people into believing it isn't working. Procrastination thrives during that stage. You think, I'll start next year, but next year becomes another year, then another. Eventually, you look back and realize that the most expensive decision you made wasn't a bad investment. It was the investment you never made. Now let's bring the story back to everyday life. Steve wants to increase his income. He knows he could learn a valuable skill. Maybe he could earn a certification. Maybe he could learn software. Maybe he could improve his communication skills. Maybe he could start a small side business. He keeps researching. He compares options. He watches other people succeed. But he doesn't start. Daniel chooses one skill. He spends a few hours each week learning it. At first, nothing happens. Then he becomes competent. He applies it at work. His responsibilities increase. Eventually, his income rises. The exact amount isn't important. What matters is that Daniel created a chain reaction. Action created skill. Skill created opportunity. Opportunity created income. Income created more capacity to invest. One small decision created several later decisions. That's how financial progress often works. Not as one giant breakthrough, as a sequence. and procrastination breaks the sequence at the beginning. This is why "I'll start later" can be more expensive than it sounds. You're not delaying one action, you're delaying everything that action could have caused. If you delay learning a skill, you may delay a promotion. If you delay investing, you delay compounding. If you delay paying expensive debt, you continue paying interest. If you delay building an emergency fund, you remain vulnerable to the next unexpected expense. If you delay negotiating your salary, you may continue earning less than your market value. The cost isn't always visible, but it accumulates. Now imagine Steve and Daniel receive the same opportunity at work. Their employer needs someone to lead a new project. Daniel volunteers. Steve thinks about it. He worries that he isn't ready. He plans to apply next time. Daniel gets the experience. The experience strengthens his resume. The resume helps him qualify for a better position. The better position increases his income. The higher income increases his investing capacity. Again, one decision creates another. Steve wasn't necessarily less capable, he simply waited. And waiting has opportunity costs. This is the hidden theme behind the entire story. Money grows from decisions that create future decisions. A good financial action rarely ends with itself. Saving creates a reserve. A reserve creates security. Security creates flexibility. Flexibility creates options. Options create better decisions. The reverse can also happen. Procrastination creates vulnerability. Vulnerability creates stress. Stress creates reactive decisions. Reactive decisions create expensive consequences. Then those consequences create more stress. That is why starting early matters, even when the initial action feels insignificant. Now, there is an important distinction. Not every delay is procrastination. Sometimes waiting is intelligent. You should compare mortgage offers. You should research major purchases. You should think carefully before changing careers. You should understand an investment before buying it. You should not rush simply because someone tells you to act. The problem is not thoughtful waiting. The problem is indefinite waiting without a decision process. If you're researching something, set a deadline. If you're saving for something, set a target. If you're paying debt, create a payment plan. If you're learning something, schedule the first session. Turn intention into a date. Because vague intentions are easy to ignore. Specific actions are harder to escape. Steve says, "I'll start investing soon." Daniel says, "I'll transfer $500 on Friday." Those sentences sound similar. They aren't. One is an intention, the other is a commitment. This is where you can use a simple rule. When something important needs to happen, ask, what is the smallest useful action I can take today? Not the biggest, the smallest. You don't need to save $20,000 today. Save $100. You don't need to master investing today. Learn one concept. You don't need to eliminate $8,000 of debt today. Make the first extra payment. You don't need to build a business today. Create the first offer. The objective is to break the psychological barrier between knowing and doing. Once you act, the next action becomes easier. That's momentum. And momentum is powerful because it reduces the emotional cost of starting. Daniel understands this instinctively. Steve keeps waiting for motivation, but motivation is unreliable. Systems are more reliable. If you automate the investment, you don't need to feel motivated every month. If you schedule the debt payment, you don't need to negotiate with yourself every payday. If you automatically transfer savings, you don't need to remember. Good financial systems reduce the number of decisions required from you. And that matters because humans are inconsistent. We get tired, we get distracted, we become optimistic, we become afraid, we change our minds. Automation can protect a good decision from a bad mood. Now imagine another 10 years pass. Steve eventually catches up in some areas. He starts investing. He builds savings. He pays down debt. He becomes more disciplined. Daniel isn't dramatically richer because of one incredible decision. He is ahead because dozens of small decisions had more time to work. And this is where the real math becomes uncomfortable. If you could choose between receiving $100 today or receiving $100 10 years from now, the answer seems obvious. You want the money today, but when the choice is between investing $100 today or investing $100 10 years from now, the earlier money has something the later money doesn't: time. The $100 invested today has 10 years to grow. The $100 invested later doesn't. This is why delaying a financial decision can be equivalent to giving away part of its potential. You don't see the loss immediately, you see it years later. That's what makes procrastination so dangerous. The punishment is delayed, and delayed consequences are easy to ignore. A person can procrastinate for years without feeling poor. Then suddenly retirement is closer, debt is still there, savings are smaller than expected, and the person wonders where the time went. Steve reaches this realization slowly. He looks at Daniel. Daniel isn't perfect. He made mistakes, he bought things he didn't need, he made investments that didn't work, he changed plans, but he kept moving. That became his advantage. He wasn't trying to avoid every mistake, he was trying to avoid staying stuck, and that's a much more realistic way to build wealth. You don't need perfect decisions. You need enough good decisions repeated long enough. You need to recover from mistakes, instead of allowing mistakes to become excuses for more delay. You need to start before you feel completely ready, because ready is often a moving target. There will always be another expense, another uncertainty, another reason to wait. The market may feel expensive, your income may not be high enough, your schedule may be busy, you may not understand everything, your life may not feel stable. If you wait for perfect conditions, you can wait forever. That doesn't mean acting recklessly, it means separating reasonable caution from endless avoidance. Steve learns that difference. He stops asking, "Is this the perfect time?" He starts asking, "Is there a useful step I can take now?" That question changes his behavior. He opens the retirement account, he transfers the first $500, he schedules the debt payment, he sets an automatic savings transfer, he chooses one skill to learn. None of those actions makes him wealthy overnight, but they change his direction, and direction matters. Because financial freedom is usually the result of thousands of small decisions pointing in the same direction. Procrastination points somewhere too. It points toward later. Later has no deadline. Later has no accountability. Later feels comfortable, until later becomes never. So the next time you catch yourself saying, "I'll do it eventually," stop. Ask yourself what waiting actually costs. Not just today, not just this month. Over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. What would the money have become? What would the skill have become? What would the habit have become? What would your confidence have become? What opportunities could have appeared because you started? That is the real cost of waiting. It isn't always the money you fail to save. It is the future that never gets a chance to compound. Steve and Daniel started with almost identical circumstances. The difference wasn't intelligence. It wasn't luck. It wasn't some secret investment. One acted earlier, the other waited for the right moment, and eventually both learned the same lesson. You don't need to do everything today. But you should stop postponing the things that matter. Start the account. Make the payment. Learn the skill, save the first dollar, ask for the raise, build the plan, take the first step, because the most expensive words in personal finance are often not, "I can't afford it." There, "I'll start tomorrow." If this made you rethink how much procrastination could be costing your future, subscribe to Adrien Money. We break down the everyday decisions that quietly shape your financial life, so you can recognize the expensive habits before they become expensive consequences. And remember this, you don't need to know exactly where you'll be 10 years from now. You just need to make sure that what you do today is helping the person you'll become. Because time is going to pass anyway. The only question is what your money, your skills, and your decisions will have become when it does.